Hello, everybody. Welcome. Want to make sure everybody can hear me. Let me know in the chat. But welcome to our virtual Guru the Gathering. We're going to get started here just in a second. Okay, perfect. Everybody can hear me. But really excited to be welcoming you guys here today. We are going to be talking all about building a knowledge-driven culture. And we have a guest here, Jacob Touchette from Shopify, who's going to be speaking. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly and walk through some of the slides we have for you today and kick us off. Everybody be sure to drop in the chat where you're from, where you're tuning in from. Okay, 1 second. Awesome. Cool. So like I said, welcome. This is another Guru the Gathering that we have, and we're going to be talking about a knowledge-driven culture today. Going to walk you through just some things that we're going to be doing. Like I said, introduce yourself in the chat. Let's all get to know each other. But yeah, what's gonna be happening? So we are going to be learning about some new Guru features today first. My coworker Imtiaz is going to jump on and talk to you guys about some new exciting features that just rolled out and how you can leverage them. We're also going to have the chance to listen to insights from Jacob during his lightning talk, discuss some of the things that he brings up when it comes to strategies in building a knowledge-driven culture. And we're going to jump into a group discussion as well to share about how we're all approaching that. And then finally, the session is going to wrap up by giving us all some networking time to be able to meet each other and just really connect. So looking forward to that. This is how the time is going to break down. We're going to kind of switch gears every 15 minutes or so. If you have any questions, be sure to drop them in the session chat. That's where we'll be communicating, and Chris and Rachel are in there to answer any questions you might have. And just before we move into what Imtiaz is going to be discussing, be sure to check this out. These are a bunch of resources we have for you. If you're not part of the Guru community yet on Slack, for sure get in there because you're missing out on a lot of awesome conversations about how to leverage Guru. People are sharing tips and tricks and everything. And then also be sure to check out an upcoming remote-a-thon sessions if you've been getting a lot of value from these video chats, because like Jacob, we have a bunch of other speakers sharing their perspectives as well. And then keep an eye out for more upcoming Guru events, including Imtiaz is going to be leading a Guru deep dive, sharing about knowledge alerts. Okay, so I'm going to let Imtiaz jump in here real quick. Let's see if he's in here.
Hey everyone, can you guys hear me? Oh, great. Okay. All right. I want to share my screen for you guys and get rolling here. Okay. I'm really excited for the announcement of the Guru Academy, which just launched officially yesterday, which contains courses for you and your teams to take to get up to speed on Guru. The first courses are all aimed at kind of getting started and onboarding. So it could be great for new employees, could be great from just a refresher standpoint for your team. And there's 3 courses that we've launched with. A course for admins, a combined course for collection owners and authors, and then a course for read-only users. Once you go to academy.getguru.com, you'll see the page, and you can just log in using your Guru credentials whenever you see the course that makes the most sense for you. And right here in this presentation, there's a Guru Public card. So if you're thinking to yourself, hey, I want to get my team ramped up on this really quickly, here's a public card. You can just copy the contents, throw it into your Guru instance, and then you'll be able to share that out really quickly. So again, please check that out. I think it's really exciting, and we're gonna be growing the academy as kind of months and quarters and year goes by, with more courses, and we're gonna have quick tips section and get into some badging and certification that's really down the road. So we're excited for that. Please check it out. I think you'll really like it. As for Guru Deep Dives, Kaylee mentioned that, and we had our Guru Deep Dives a few weeks ago. And the second part of amplifying your knowledge surrounds knowledge alerts and setting up Slack activity feeds and ask an expert and commenting. And we know that these features are really, really important right now in our distributed world. So if you're curious about how other teams are using Guru, then definitely check this out. The RSVP link is right there for the session on June 18th. And you'll notice that in this bullet points here, it's split up into a couple different sections. I'll be giving a functional demo of a couple of the features. And then there's going to be a Guru on Guru example. And that Guru on Guru example is someone else from Guru that uses it internally. So you could see how we use this feature, which will be really awesome. So Julia Safa, who is part of our revenue empowerment team, is gonna give us a walkthrough on knowledge alerts. And then for the customer showcase, we are so close to like locking in the customer, and I don't want to kind of spoil that before it's like 100% confirmed, but that's to be determined. So that'll be released. We'll update the landing page and the RSVP once we have that locked in. But and then afterwards, we want to hear from you, and that's really kind of what the session's about. It's how are you using these features? What questions do you have? What blockers are there for you and your team that we could help as a community kind of source solutions to. So please RSVP for the deep dives. I think you'll find it really valuable. There are some new features, if you haven't seen them yet, that came out as part of our spring launch. There is a really cool overview video, and I'm always just crazy impressed by our brand studio and the theming that they do. So if anyone watched Legends of the Hidden Temple as a kid on Nickelodeon, which I gotta say, I didn't really watch a ton, but like I knew of it, and I kind of got the gist of what it was after just getting on YouTube real fast to refresh myself. But the video kind of has that theme. I think you'll really like it. It's very clever. But a few of the actual features are favorites lists. And so if you haven't started using favorites lists, they are so great. You can start just right on the left side of a card. You can see in the image there, click the heart, and then you'll have an option to add and create favorite lists. So I think of it like curating your own music playlist from your entire Guru instance for things that just you need. And there's also dynamic email notifications. And in your Gmail, when you are getting those notification emails from your team, you can take actions right there in your email. So in the little GIF right here, you can see that you're expanding a card, and you can even verify it like right then and there. So if you haven't seen these features in action, please do some exploring, and it's going to be really awesome for your team. And definitely check out the Legends of the Hidden Temple video, because it's just tons of fun. And a couple more items that we have. There's a really awesome blog post on how to collaborate remotely so that you and your team can feel really connected. Check that out. It's a good read, and I think if you share that around with your team, they might can spark some really good conversation around how Guru can be really impactful for your team. And then if you were at the customer summit, or you missed the customer summit, or you just want to share the customer summit with your team, the recording is right here in this link. So when you get this presentation, check that out, share it, and or rewatch it again if you missed something that you wanted to refresh yourself on. So these are the announcements. These are the new features, the Academy, deep dives, and while we have a few minutes before we get over to Jacob, I would love to answer any questions you have about what I just went over. And if you throw them in the chat, I can kind of address them there. It's not a Zoom thing where we would jump in at the moment. But if you have anything that you want to throw out there, I might give it a second and see if anyone has questions. Okay. Well, if they come up, I'll be around in the chat to kind of answer whatever comes up. But otherwise, thanks guys for listening, and I just can't wait to hear from Jacob. Thank you.
All right. Looks like somebody. Okay, cool. Looks like Caroline asked if we could touch on the Guru Academy again. Chris jumped in with the link there, which is live for everybody to check out. But definitely let us know if you have more questions as they come up. And I am looking forward to handing it off to Jacob. He's going to be talking all about building a knowledge-driven culture. And what's really cool about his perspective is that he was one of the first employees at Shopify hired to build out their knowledge function. So he is kind of an expert in doing that from scratch, day zero. So I'm going to bring him in here right now. Yeah, I'm looking forward to his chat.
Hi.
Hey, Jacob, welcome. I'm going to turn off my screen real quick so you can share your slides, but we're all looking forward to hearing from you.
Fantastic. I'm excited. So I'm going to share my screen here, jump this into present mode, and grab my notes up, and we'll get into it. And I was going to grab my notes. There we go. Okay. All right. So hi, everyone. My name is Jacob Touchette, and I'm a knowledge management specialist at Shopify. Oops, went the wrong way there. Great way to start off. Shopify is a global commerce platform that lets you start, grow, and manage a business. Currently, we have over 5,000 employees, with nearly 5,000 of those set up as users in Guru. Teams using Guru at Shopify include support, Shopify Plus, talent, internal solutions, internal security, and many more. Some of the tools with which we've integrated or looked at integrating with Guru, Slack, Zendesk, Salesforce, Google Drive, and Intercom. A little bit more about me specifically here. I'm on the support content strategy team. It's part of the broader support learning and development team, which is part of the knowledge management org within support. My title, as Kaylee mentioned earlier, is knowledge management specialist. But over the roughly 5 years I've had this title, my job has changed around quite a bit. I was part of the team to build out the initial KM program and support. I helped to select Guru as a new KM tool and to make the transition to the tool. I've written heaps of Guru cards for our support team, but nowadays my job primarily consists of managing our Guru instance and trying to figure out the best way to use all of its features. So 2 quick notes I want to make before we get deep into it. First, I'll be speaking to the experience of our internal knowledge and tools. The Shopify Help Center is a key part of the knowledge management org at Shopify, but the story there is a little bit different. And then second, I'll be using the abbreviation KM a lot in this presentation. And just to make sure there's no confusion, that stands for knowledge management. So, but for now, let's go back in time about 5 years ago. So I was one of 2 of the first people hired into the knowledge management org when it was started up by Dana Tessier, our current director of knowledge management. In these beginning times, it was our job to make KM work for support while building a knowledge-driven culture. In the beginning, there was a patchwork of tools, no direction on how to manage information, and our frontline support team was frequently learning of new features when a merchant called in to ask about them. Leadership was pretty hands-off at the time, providing little guidance in how to go about ensuring information was documented and accessible to all those who needed it. Things were scrappy, and the value of taking the time to organize and properly document information didn't seem to outweigh the benefit or the cost of the time it would take to do those things. So everyone was able to contribute to the internal wiki, but there was no incentive to do so, and there were no repercussions for not doing so. So we needed a way to change the org's culture while dealing with a hyper-growth company like Shopify. To tackle the problem, we hit the 5 points I'll be going over with you today. So I didn't number these points because they overlap in a lot of places in terms of actual implementation, but this is the order I'll be going through the examples from my experience. So first, we'll talk about a unified strategy. You need a knowledge management strategy that is applied across the board. So for us, this meant within support, but if you can create one for your whole company, even better. Show the value. KM is such a hard thing to measure the direct impacts of, so it's important you emphasize the value wherever you can. Leadership buy-in. Getting leadership on board is key. Without their buy-in, not only will it be much harder to push any initiatives forward, but users won't come on board as easily without them. Empowering users. Empowering users to contribute and share information is key. If you're not learning from them, then you're missing out on knowledge that could benefit your entire user base. And then create engagement opportunities. Empowerment without engagement is just lost opportunities. So give people a reason to participate in your great KM plans. So unified strategy. To start building a knowledge-driven culture, you need to have a unified and clear knowledge management strategy in place. It doesn't need to be really fancy, but it should be something you can reference as a sort of North Star in all of your KM efforts. In the beginning of the KM program at Shopify, we were lucky enough to have a clearly defined culture value. We would have clearly defined culture values, rather, which we could build and align our strategy around. So phrases like "do things, tell people" were written on the walls of the office, which is definitely helpful when you're trying to introduce the concepts of knowledge management. But there was still a need for a clear strategy, even with these culture values baked into the company. So for us, we defined our initial approach, what our scope would be, our goals, and how it would impact the goals of our stakeholders. So our initial approach that we defined was some of the tasks you might expect from a KM program starting up, including auditing existing content and tools, creating a style guide, finding our subject matter experts to help in the creation and maintenance of content. Our scope was pretty clear from the beginning. Dana had been brought in to figure out KM for support, and so our scope was to be the support team. Our goal was to help users find the information they need quickly and easily, and this would impact the organizational goals of operational effectiveness and helping merchants make money. Not all companies have this clear of a connection between KM and culture values, and not all companies may even have clearly defined culture values at all. And for those companies, it's important within your strategy to define how knowledge management and being knowledge-driven impacts what is important to the company. So take the time to consider your company's mission and how a knowledge management strategy can be constructed and presented in a way that contributes to that mission or goal. The last bit around aligning with goals and showing the impact of your strategy lines up really well with this next point, which is showing the value. Value here can mean a number of things. It can mean demonstrating the impact to existing recorded metrics or objectives and key results, also known as OKRs. It can mean detailing anecdotal benefits of a knowledge management strategy and your specific plans to influence the company's culture. There's value in terms of the measurable returns on specific efforts, but showing the value of knowledge management efforts can be really difficult. There are a lot of factors at play, and tying specific outcomes to single efforts can be near impossible. So often we're working with measurable proxies for metrics, using anecdotal evidence, and creating a sort of constellation of measurements which work together to paint a picture of the impacts of knowledge management. So when we started our KM program, detailing the value of knowledge management was important, and we did it in a number of ways. This right here is an example of what our constellation looked like at one time. So we used analytics to show where people were viewing content and measured views over time as one method of tracking engagement with that content. We tracked the amount of internal documentation we had, and as we worked to clean it up, we tracked edits, additions, new docs, and how we worked to structure the content. We surveyed users to get a baseline of how easy they felt it was to find information and how much they trusted the content in the knowledge base, both before and after our efforts. And through all of these metrics, as well as some metrics we were already measuring for other parts of the business, we were able to point to our efforts and say, hey, these outcomes are all correlated with these metrics. Here are the befores and afters and how we were able to make those improvements. Now, a lot of these efforts account for showing value to leadership and other stakeholders, but you need to show value of your KM practices to your users as well. Now, we do this through onboarding sessions where we meet with groups of new hires, excuse me, and detail the best practices as well as what our team is committed to delivering. We demo how tagging works and the effectiveness of filtering searches, in addition to the onboarding course materials around KM practices that we already have in place. Next up is leadership buy-in. Now, you can have the best ideas in the world around your knowledge management strategy, but without leadership buy-in, you won't see much traction. Any efforts to impact your organization's culture will either be glacially slow or just completely impossible. By leadership here, I'm talking about people who are managing or leading people rather than technical leads. So generally, you'll use the previous 2 points we talked about to get leadership buy-in, but I think it's worth breaking it into its own point here. People take their cues from leadership, and if your KM initiatives don't have the support of them, of leaders, that is, users will notice, and any processes you develop will not get the uptake you need to create that knowledge-driven culture. At Shopify, this was an interesting task to tackle in the beginning, because there was clearly some buy-in already, as evidenced by Dana having been hired to figure out KM for support. But there was still some hesitation from support leadership around the need for KM. And so it was through the creation of that unified strategy and being able to show the value of KM practices, along with many, many conversations with those leads, that led to the eventual buy-in. And it could be taken as a stronger narrative that Shopify support's leadership was brought over to the side of believers in KM after being shown the value and understanding our strategy. So if you have some opposition in your own companies, I really hope this helps by showing you that they can, in fact, be won over. But beyond having them bought into the idea, leaders need to publicly support KM initiatives and actively participate in them, however possible. Beyond the specific messaging you're putting out to users, seeing leads participate and will reinforce the importance of knowledge management and how seriously your company is taking the implementation of good KM practices. Now, empower users. Create pathways for users to share knowledge easily and in a way that promotes a level of ownership. Removing as much friction as possible from this process is key to ensuring there's uptake. So think of this in the way you might think about a product. The more steps a customer has to take, the less likely they will be to convert to purchasing that product. So this kind of empowerment can take a lot of different forms. At Shopify, we decided early on that we needed every user to be able to create and edit content as they felt necessary. Even as we scaled from a support team of under 100 people to a team with over 2,000, we did not want users to lose that ability. This lets us learn directly from our front line based on what they're dealing with in every interaction. Even with that power that we've given them, we still look for as many ways as possible for people to be empowered in sharing and maintaining knowledge. This is supported by having open lines of communication internally. Have a question about content or want to suggest new content but can't write it yourself? Then there are guidelines in place for who your users can reach out to for help. Letting people become so directly involved in the contribution and maintenance of information also means they are more likely to champion your KM initiatives, which leads me nicely into my next point, which is create engagement opportunities for your users. Users who aren't given ways to engage with the knowledge base in some way won't stay on board with your KM practices, no matter how good they look on paper. Engagement can mean a lot of different things, and some of the processes and tools used to empower users can act as methods of engagement. So comments in Guru are a good example here for users to engage with the content while simultaneously empowering them to contribute to the knowledge base, even if they don't have author privileges. Creating engagement opportunities for your also keep an eye out for those who are highly engaged and reward the positive behaviors. This can be something social like saying thank you or something more monetary like a gift card. Keep these people in mind when you're looking for feedback or want to explore new ideas. They are invaluable sources of information. In some cases, you'll find users who are doing things completely contrary to your KM strategy, like documenting information in their own private Google Doc that they share with a few other people rather than using the knowledge base, for example. It's important to recognize that while these specific behaviors aren't desirable, that person is clearly motivated and engaged with the ideas of KM. At Shopify, we would reach out to that person and work with them to redirect that energy into the proper KM channels. This doesn't mean punishing them, but instead recognizing the positive aspects of the work they've done and showing them the benefits of directing their energy into the existing KM system and processes, killing them with kindness and all that kind of thing. All of these points came into play in the early days of KM at Shopify. There were a bunch of passionate individuals who were all doing what they thought was best for support in terms of documenting and sharing information. However, without any coordination or strategy, it ended up kind of resembling Swiss cheese left out of the fridge for too long, which is to say there were big gaps all over the place and some parts were moldy and no longer any good. Now, by bringing these people on board and redirecting their energies, they became champions for KM practices and Guru specifically. Many of them continue to be our strongest contributors and advocates. So those are what I would say the main points to building a knowledge-driven culture and implementing KM practices are. But no conversation this late into 2020 would be complete if we didn't address the COVID of it all. How did building this culture and these KM practices help us in the turbulent times of the coronavirus? Well, I can honestly say that as a result of the coronavirus, we didn't actually need to make any significant changes to our KM strategy or practices. We were able to leverage all of the aspects of our existing culture to adapt to the myriad of changes we experienced both in terms of contact volume within support as well as internal changes. Our system of allowing everyone to contribute to the knowledge base meant that through the incredibly busy times of the coronavirus, people weren't missing out on key information as it developed. Our communication channels continued to bring information to those who needed it, and Guru cards were created for developing issues and new processes. Overall, having this strong knowledge management backbone meant that we were more prepared to deal with the rapidly changing world. And pictured here on the screen now is a bit of a peek at the number of collections in our Guru instance. This really only encompasses the collections for which my specific team helps to manage, but as I mentioned, that shared contribution model means that all of our users are responsible for maintaining them. And then I got one more, some takeaways. So in summary, I wanted to present some of the key takeaways from this talk, and I hope that these points are helpful to you, and you can take them back to your work to implement or improve your KM practices while building a knowledge-driven culture. So unified strategy, show the value, get leadership buy-in, empower your users, and then create engagement opportunities. Thank you so much, and that's it. Now it's time for the questions. I'll just.
All right.
Let's start my screen share here.
Cool. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions for Jacob, be sure to drop them in the chat. I know I was in the middle of typing, but just the visual alone of the number of collections that you guys work in shows how well this organization or like the knowledge organization within your teams works and runs itself. So I think Chris would love for you to touch on how do you bake knowledge management best practices into new employee onboarding?
That's a really good question. So we have a number of different ways that we do that. There are some courses that like involve just kind of reading what are the processes and things like that, standard stuff, as well, and then some quizzes that go on to do that. But the new employees are also encouraged like to make edits, make comments, and create new cards when they're starting out. Sometimes this is just making a test card and then archiving it. And all of that. So they're actually getting into the flow of using the tool and figuring out like, what does it mean to like make a card? How does it work? Those kinds of things. And then we reinforce some of those things in that onboarding session that I mentioned. I actually still do, I would say 99% of those onboarding sessions. So I talk to basically every new hire into support and go over like, this is how you use Guru. We encourage you guys to participate and all that. So that's how we kind of put it in there.
Wow. Yeah, I think people are definitely impressed by the amount of collections. So Sarah asked, how long did it take before you felt that the culture shift towards, healthy knowledge management actually happened?
This is it's a gradual thing, I think. There's not like one point in my mind that I can point to and say like, oh yeah, this is where we tipped over the meter. When we first started, there were people who were super on board right away. And then the majority of people were kind of on the fence about it. And then we had a small bit of like active vocal detractors saying like, we want our old ways back. We were used to something, which I think is typical of any kind of change that's happening. And but as we went along, we did a lot of work to educate people. We did a lot of like similar to the onboarding sessions I do now. I did a lot of walkthroughs, lots of communications, that kind of stuff to bring people on board. And slowly but surely, we got all of the sort of people who were in the middle to come onto the positive side and reduce the number of detractors greatly. I think at this point I can confidently say there's no one who's actively detracting, but it's just there's always people who don't like what you do or who have issues with certain parts of a tool. So that's just what it is.
We're love for Google Docs that just won't evolve, maybe.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Why don't we tackle your question first? I know you're impressed by the amount of collections.
Definitely. That's awesome. Thank you, guys.
So that question was how we manage all the collections, right? Sorry.
Well, yeah. Like, do you think about, like, we have a collection, we have 800 cards right now. Clearly not as much as you do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking all the time about, well, if we scale this up to 2000s, will people actually find what they're looking for? And the other thing is, how do you take care of redundancy, right? Like, if you have 2000 cards, but like 500 of those cards could be reduced to nothing, right? Because there's a bunch of other cards that address it. Like, how do you tackle redundancy in those situations? Do you care? Maybe you don't care.
So I do care about redundancy. I don't like it.
Okay.
Not a fan. But it's a good question. We're looking at like you mentioned, you have like 1,000 cards. We've got about I want to say over 15,000 cards in the entirety of our Guru instance, and that number is growing constantly every day. A lot of cards are being added. Our contribution model, like I mentioned, is open contribution. So like the idea is ideally someone would not find what they're looking for and then get the answer to that and then create the card, right? And so in that sense, that should help to prevent a lot of redundancy. And even since Guru rolled out the duplicate detection feature, which lets us which alerts us to when cards are really similar. Even when that was rolled out, we were kind of worried about the same thing, because we were struggling a little bit, like, how do we manage to find duplicates? Like, do we just export all the content, like trying to figure, do searches through it? Like, what do we do? And the duplicate detection actually really reaffirmed our current strategy, because there were just not that many. And in the specific instances where there were things kind of duplicated, we took a closer look at them. And in many cases, it was people just like customizing specific things for their team within collections that were private to their team and only like specific groups. So the redundancy that we did have wasn't really like redundant. It was actually quite useful. So yeah, that's where we're at. I think if you have a different kind of authoring structure, you'd have different approaches for that. If you had something structured with like a team of authors dedicated to creating all of your content, I think in that case it might be easier to catch that, because then you can just be like, well, we're writing everything, so we know everything that exists. So.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I have more questions, but I'll let other people ask first.
I can go after Tyler's question too here, because he asked it in the other chat here. How learn more about tagging at Shopify and how I leverage that when searching. I love to talk about tagging, so please stop me if I get on a bit of a rant. I developed the tagging strategy that we use in our Guru instance, and I help to manage it to this day. I'm very proud of it. But we use tagging. The way that we developed our tagging structure was we kind of struggled, because originally we had none. We had no strategy for that. And so tags are just cropping up like everywhere, and like all sorts of terms, tons of redundancy, no like equal application. So filters were useless. Like it was all over the place. And so we decided like, okay, well, let's figure out like what is a tagging structure that works? How can we manage it? And how do we go forward from there? So we developed a couple of rules that we use when any new tags come to light about whether or not we keep it. And they are, is there reasonable minimum amount of content? We try not to use hard numbers because it is kind of subjective. So is there enough content to actually warrant a tag? If it's one card, probably not. Is this the correct and common vernacular? So is this the term that people are using? And also, is it a term that accurately represents the thing? This comes up a lot, especially if you have terms that are shortened frequently into acronyms or initializations in your company. You have to watch out for those. And like, do people use that more? Is it clear the other way? What is the person you hired yesterday going to think about that term? It can't be. We're looking for no redundancies, so we're not looking to create the exact same tag. Some tags have overlap, and that's okay. But if they are basically the same topic, like, let's not do that, because then it reduces the usefulness. And then we also look at whether there is so much content that the tag ceases to be useful. So in like Shopify's case, if we tag something like commerce or made a Shopify tag, like, that becomes really useless. Like that doesn't make any sense. So that's how we approach it. And then we also just like kind of apply a bit of common sense. Like, okay, this tag only has a couple of cards, but like, we do have a lot of tags related to tooling that we use, for example. So is this another tool? Okay, it makes sense given the sort of the trend of those tags to do that already. As for managing them actively, that is a decent amount of work. That's part of my job and someone else that I work with. We review tags all the time because, as I mentioned, everyone has author permissions, and so we get stray tags created pretty frequently. And so we just go through our tag manager, look for anything new against our existing tag structure, add it to a list because it means there's a demand, and then we review those on a monthly cadence while just deleting the ones that are coming up, so it's not, damaging that structure.
Thank you so much. On one of those points that you said, like in the rules, the correct and common vernacular, we just had a lot of new people join our company. And one of the problems they're having is they don't know how we refer to things. How do you teach like new people, like this is how we refer to this and that's what it's going to be tagged under, not what you think it is, it's this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a tough one. At least at Shopify, this is a common issue that comes up when people are like a lot of our new gurus, because our support people are called gurus, so I do apologize if that's confusing. But a lot of our gurus, when they're hired, initially the feedback we get is like, I'm having trouble finding this particular thing, or like, how do we get this thing? But then we talk to them a few months later, or 6 months down the line, like 3 to 6 months down the line, they're like, that isn't as much of a problem anymore. And that's because like they are learning the terminology, the jargon of our world as they go. We try to keep that jargon to a minimum. Like we try to use terms that are understandable in the real world, but so many things have double sort of meanings. I remember in one of the Guru events, I want to say it was the Customer Summit. I was speaking with the product manager for search. Oh my God, she used to be our CSM, and now I'm blanking on her name. But I was talking to her, and she was saying like she was talking about like they are looking at how synonyms might work at some point, that kind of thing, and mentioned that for example, like address might be a word that has like a really clear meaning to a retail company doing deliveries, but to Shopify, address means like domains, URLs, websites, and so like the term itself is not jargon necessarily, but like having to learn the context around it, I think just comes with experience. There are just so many terms that you can't really account for everything. And so you have to accept that, like, at least we've come to accept at least a little bit of a learning curve to those things. So I don't think, maybe that's not super helpful.
Just to chime in there, oh, sorry, go ahead, Caroline.
No, I mean, that just makes sense. It's like, as these people like understand that this is how we call a card and this is how we talk about a subject, they're like, oh, okay, I get it now. I just didn't know if anybody else had a magic way for others to know.
Yeah, definitely not a magic solution, and I guess it's a little nuanced per organization. One thing that we do, which I really like, I'll share my screen real quick and just show you guys. Let's see. Tell me if I'm sharing the right thing. Give me 1 second here. Got too many windows open. Every collection we have, can you guys see this says marketing collection right there? Mm-hmm. So we have, for every collection, we've like standardized this. There's collection standards. And then we have basically, and this is like onboarding for teams as well. Like it just gives like direction. And then one of the cards, so there's like 3 cards typically, like ownership and standards, just to like orient everyone around like for this collection, how do things work? And then to your point, we have a template card that is there for every collection called glossary and tags, which is just like kind of documents that, since it is a little bit different per collection. Typically, most of our collections are organized by department. So this is how we've done it. But again, it's like, I think everyone kind of tackles it in different ways.
Zooming into a specific example, Caroline, we were going through this recently because we reformatted all of our customer story cards in Guru. This was a project I've been working on, and our terminology for it was the most difficult part to tackle, because story and like how people use story or think of stories in their workflow could be used in a bunch of different ways. So one of the ways we're trying to overcome this problem, which we still have, is associate a term with a specific card in a specific use case or like part in your workflow where you're using that card. So when people think of a term, it's like, oh, that means that I'm using this type of thing with this type of card in this specific instance. And then the other term is this specific type of card for the specific instance. So we're hoping, I think like as this project evolved, that has already helped get us more adoption, because it's just clear for people about like what to associate the term with, but it's definitely always an evolution.
Yeah, all that helps a lot. Thanks, guys.
And let me just give a quick plug. In July, in our roadmap for Guru Deep Dives, we're going to dive into tagging, which probably will help with some of that as well. So stay tuned for that RSVP. That'll be happening in July.
I have a question about sort of governance of Guru. So, I mean, Shopify obviously has
you might still be on, or you might, here you go, I unmuted you. If you're going to. Yeah, I muted for a second, so go ahead.
Okay. Governance. My question is about governance of Guru. So like right now, our company has maybe 200 or so employees. And I'm the only person who's like sort of governing Guru. Shopify clearly has a lot more employees, and I want to understand, like, since I'm the only person in this like role, like, how can I plan out a good sort of roadmap for saying, look, I mean, at some point it's going to be too much for me to just keep tabs on everything, try to evangelize by myself. Is there like either someone I hire to help me directly or under me, or what are those roles? What are those key hires in a department that manages knowledge for the organization?
That's a good question. I had a little less to do with like the like hiring strategy, that kind of thing. My focus was more on content and building that out. But I would say, like, based on the experience that I had, that I think if you can, like, if you're just looking to make a case for like, hey, this is going to be too much work for me, I think like there's a few easy ways you could, well, not easy, but a few ways you can do that. Is like using your analytics to plot, like, this is like the current trend for card creation. Like, this is the trend for like employees hired on. This is, you know, the kind of views that we're getting and the kind of critical information that's in there. And presenting that in a way that is like, okay, and this is what my bandwidth is. Like, this is how many hours in a day I have, and like what percentage of my time is being applied to that. Now, like, putting all of those metrics together is like a not inconsiderate amount of time to do, I think, because you kind of have to do a lot of like tracking, a lot of thinking about that. But if you can present that and show, you know, whoever is in charge of hiring, or whoever the lead of your team or whatever is, and say like, okay, look, based on this, like, I'm going to need another person just to maintain by X date. But I would love to grow this program, because like here, like, obviously there's value because you have me doing this. So if we want to grow it, we're going to need more hands in some way. And like, I don't think you need to always default to saying like hire more people, because that's not always the right way. Like, more hands is not always the best thing. But if it's just becoming too much to manage, even the maintenance of it, I think it's important to show why that is and be like, this is where it's heading. So like, I need another person, or soon this whole thing is going to fall apart.
I think the reason why it sort of becomes a little bit centralized, can you guys hear me, by the way? Okay. The reason I think it gets a little too centralized and it bogs me down is because I'm both the SME and the Guru manager. And I basically end up like I create a bunch of cards, like you said, like just tons and tons of cards. And there's some people who do that too. I know a couple of people who are really good at creating cards, and they do that great. But there's no real governance structure, right? Like, there's no one who knows, like, they're making Guru cards kind of Wild West like sort of thing. And I'm letting that happen because I'd rather that happen than like start to put rules and people don't do it. So at the beginning, it's just like, just make cards, don't tag them, do whatever you want. Like, at some point I need to like wrangle that though, because I think, you know, if we create like 2,000 cards and it's just me then trying to wrangle 2,000 cards and figuring out the tagging system for that, I'm gonna give up. Like, it's like too daunting of a task. So I'm trying to see how much structure can I put in place now to help with then just having to backlog just a crazy amount of information. So whether I, you know, hire someone to just, you know, worry about tagging and like making sure like we have a tagging system, and maybe it's someone who like is like an internal consultant of sorts that helps other people make cards while they still don't know how to make cards. And then again, I still need to be an SME, so I still need to create cards myself. So all of that is a little overwhelming, and I'm trying to see from people who've done it before what makes the best strategy there.
I'm in the exact same kind of position right now. I took over Guru like six months ago, kind of. And at the time, it was
same here too, like some 4 months or something.
It was no structure. It was basically for our in-house team to keep all of our Google Docs in one place so we could all reference each other's Google Docs pretty much. And since then, we've hired a lot of remote workers who don't have our in-house knowledge, and we're never part of the like in-house onboarding, in-house training. Like, they don't know anything about everything that we know. So I've had to restructure everything by myself, like create new cards, do everything. And I last week hit the point where I was like, this is no longer a one-person job. There needs to be more people doing this. And it's really overwhelming. Like, I know exactly the feelings. You're not alone in the feelings of it gets to the point where you're like, this is not a me job anymore. This is a team job. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, if anybody else has I've been starting to get to delegate information, and I'm sure Guru has this, some kind of like, this is how you format card, like instructions on how to format. But I made a card for our team about like, this is how we format. We use this, this, and this. We don't use this. This is how you do this thing. And that's helped some just in the past week, like starting to get more people doing cards the same way.
I think I love hearing about that, Caroline. I think actually the fact that you guys brought this up and are both struggling with this, I think it would make a great topic for Guru the Gathering next time. And we can, of course, continue this conversation in the community, but definitely tackling that like first hire for knowledge and how to scale this, within your company is huge. And I think a lot of people are getting through it too. So I'm going to just transition us real quick, if that's okay. Thank you so much for the discussion and Jacob for speaking. And we're going to go into like a lightning round of networking soon. But I just wanted to wrap us up and just really share. Hold on, let me share my screen real quick. Just wanted to make sure everybody had these resources on their radar again. So we're going to start a thread, I think, right after this in the community to continue talking about like new hires and how to scale, because I know there's some people there, especially who went through this last year and how to make some of those decisions. So that'll be interesting, but make sure you're in there if you're not in there already. And then also check out the Remoticon page for links to things about knowledge-driven culture. Guru just published a research report about it with a lot of interesting stats after interviewing a bunch of companies to see how other people did it and how they think of knowledge in their company. And I think that that could also be a great resource for you guys as you try and scale the knowledge efforts. And then also check out the upcoming Remotathon sessions. You're going to want to RSVP to MTS deep dive coming up. And then, of course, if you go to events.getguru.com, you'll be able to see the full map of all of the upcoming Guru virtual events. And then before we, looks like I'm on the wrong side. Before we just hop off, I just want to remind everybody, first I wanted to say thank you for everybody taking the time to come to this lightning talk and virtual Guru the Gathering today. And then these are just a few points of feedback that we're looking for. If you think about it after this session, drop Chris and I a message in Slack or just send us an email about, how you found this useful, what we could do better to improve, because really this is just about us bringing the community together and starting those discussions so that we can all tackle those shared challenges that we face.